with my first Saturday sit down. And so the question is, what is a Saturday sit down? I was speaking with Catherine, who is my daughter, and we were talking about the podcast and content. She's 27, so she's way more up to date than this stuff with me, who is older than that. And she said, Mom, people want to connect. And I was like, okay, what's the way to do that? And we talked about being able to reflect off of the weekly podcast. And for me to take that opportunity, or this opportunity, I should say, to talk about some of those subjects a little bit more in depth. So, in that regards, this Saturday sit down concept was developed, and she came up with the name. And I do like the idea. This gives me time to speak about things on my own solo in a little bit longer extended process to do it. Therefore, this conversation will be exclusively on the YouTube channel. So if you are interested in this and staying up to date with as they come out on Saturdays, please like this conversation and subscribe. And also to the Widow and Widowers on the private Facebook group, we will also have this conversation. So here we go. One of the things in the video that was just, I should say podcast, that was just released Thursday on February 9th with my brother Jesse, we talked about a lot of different things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is order. Everybody's not organized, but the reality is everybody does die at one point in time. And a lot of times people say, well, I need to be prepared if something happens. Something is going to happen. Someone is going to pass. And if you have the ability to do a few things to put things in place, it would be helpful. One, to be able to have expressed what your wishes are for your body with your loved ones. For them to know if you want to be cremated, if you want to be buried, what you would want that to look like. In my conversations with my late husband, Mark, we talked a lot about that. In fact, he often told me that he saw himself leaving this world early. And he expressed to me that he wanted to be cremated. That took the burden off of me in a very difficult time to identify what he wanted. So he was cremated. I was able to bring his children, Catherine and Alexander, into the process when we were at the funeral home. One of them identified I can't think of the name of the box that you go in when you're cremated, but one of my children designed that. Another one developed the spray that was going to go on his dad's casket. So having things in order made less pressure on me. Another way to have things in order, if you have any bank accounts, checking account, no matter what they are, if you have $5 in there or 500,000, you want to have a list of what those accounts are. They don't even know the amount, but the passwords and everything to access your finances, electricity bill, all the things that you know that you are solely responsible for, that if someone else had to come behind you wouldn't have the ability to know or do, to list out those accounts where banks are located. And there's a thing called paid on death, where upon your demise that someone would automatically have access to that. There are also trusts. There are also a lot of different legal things to talk to a lawyer to set up your inheritance and make that so it's a less taxable implication. Another thing is to have life insurance, to be able to have $15,000 to $30,000 life insurance if you want to make sure that you're at least covering your service. Not that other people need to chip in and do that, not leaving somebody money that they're going to get rich, but just taking care of your last final arrangements. Those policies are relatively inexpensive. You can check at your financial institutions, like where you bank, credit union. You can look some up online. I don't have a recommendation, but I know it takes the stress off of people to know that they don't have to hunt and search for money to be able to bury you and to be able to honor you in your life. So if you have a significant other, those are some things to talk about. Another thing about order, when my husband passed, my mind was gone. I could not think about a lot. There wasn't a lot that I could recall. So what I started doing, I had a little notepad. And I would write down notes literally every day what I needed to do. Before Mark's passing, I could have remembered those things, but I had to realize my mind was not what it was normally. So, keeping the little notepad, I would also keep a pad by the front door because there's something about for me when I would cross the door and come back and forth, I would think of different things that I needed to do. So, that was very helpful for me. Another thing, finances. It's tough. It's really tough right now. COVID, people are unemployed, people are being very creative as far as how making income. So a lot of people may be starting new businesses. They may not have a employer that's providing them life insurance. So it's something that you want to go look into and search for yourself. I know I mentioned life insurance once, but I wanted to mention it again intentionally because it's a way to spend a little bit of money, but to have a big amount when it's needed. Now, you may say, I'm alone. I don't have anybody that I'm concerned about writing a list for or to have paid upon death and all those different things, but you have yourself and you want you to be honored. And whatever that family, that cousin, that member coming in that would be honoring your wishes, if you have a will and you have things laid out, maybe you want your contents or your belongings to be donated. Whatever that looks like, you will not be there to make those decisions. And if someone's going to act on your behalf, the more you can lay out what those decisions would look like, the better that process would be as far as honoring your life. One of the things that my brother said in our conversation is that the journey never stops. The memory of that person never goes away. I remember, if some of you were able to join me in the radio conversation I had with Kelly Hunter on Winning Credit Solutions on Red Ink Radio Live, we talked about how Kelly is going on 7 years with her husband passing, and I'm at 6, and I still miss Mark. I still miss him. And I would see 10, 20, 30 years still missing him. I still get mail in his name. I have moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and I'm still getting mail to him. And when I moved to Virginia, and the first time that I received mail, it shook me. It shook me hard. I was thinking that that's not something I would have to deal with anymore. Another thing that happened now, to this date, I will see friends or acquaintances that I've not seen in some time, and they ask me how Mark is doing. And it takes my breath away. And I have to tell them he's passed. And they look at me in shock, and I have to recant the story and tell them what's happened and what's going on. It does not go away. But what has changed for me, before, if it was, let's say about 3, 6, and this is just my timeline, everybody's timeline is different. 3, 6 months, I met someone and they asked how Mark was doing. I was crying no matter where it was. We could have been in the street, standing there talking in the parking lot. We could have been in a grocery store. We could have been in a building. Just eliciting his name would cause me to break down. It's interesting now when I have conversations about Mark or someone thinking that he's here. More memories, more of that love, more of that warmth just comes over me. And I'm grateful for that. And I know it's been conversations with people in my hood that have made this an opportunity to be able to be. Another thing that my brother talked about is cleaning up after that person leaves. And I want to talk about what that looked like for me, because that was hard. And in the conversation back that I had with Kelly, we talked about what that looked like in some regards. In having the conversation for me with different widows and widowers, gave me perspective and insight that I could make that cleanup process what it was going to be in my own terms. A few things that came to mind. Mark, we had these false craft plate sets. They were white with a blue trim, and I think it was called the Aurora package. And we would go to this place called the Pottery in Williamsburg. And his mom, who is also now deceased, every time Barbara would come from Pennsylvania to where we were living here in Virginia, because Virginia is where Mark and I lived when we first got married, we would go to Williamsburg and go and pick out some pieces of the false craft. And over the years, because we were together for 29 years, we had every piece. And I loved looking at that. Now, this was back in the time where there was like the blue geese pattern around. So, yeah, way in the kitchen. Now, you move forward 32 years later, looking at those dishes gave me, I could not eat the dishes that my deceased husband adored and his deceased mom helped us purchase. For me, it was just too painful. I remember going into the kitchen at some 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to make a snack and just staring and looking at those dishes and saying, I cannot do this anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't do that. I packed them up in boxes and I moved them out of the way, and I just started using paper plates and some plastic forks, because looking at that gave me peace versus the flood of memories looking at those plates. I eventually purchased something else. In fact, Mark liked round plates. I wanted square plates, and I took that opportunity to go and get me some square plates that I liked and some silverware. Didn't have to be something huge. They have some cool stuff at Dollar Tree. They have the charger plates and a lot of other different things that you can stack together and make a setting that is fitting for you. That remaining spouse or your significant other is gone and you need to have a plate. Because for me, looking at my food and it was on something nice, it gave me joy. It gave me peace to be able to look at that and say, okay, I'm going to enjoy a meal that I have made on my plates, and to be able to do that. And it wasn't a lot of cost involved in doing that. Now you can go to whatever store you want to and do something high end, but the option is there, and just buy it a little bit at a time. It's you eating. At the beginning, you really need one set. So another thing that I had to deal with in cleaning up and reorganizing in Mark's absence were our wedding bands. I'd seen people wear their wedding bands in their original format onto a necklace. And I was like, okay, I actually and inquired with someone that seemed to be older. And I was like, I remember when we were in high school, you would do that. You'd have somebody's band on your neck. And I was like, I think there's something different with this. And when I approached the person, they were kind enough to tell me about it. I was speaking with a friend of mine at work, Jennifer, and she told me about a widow who had taken her wedding bands and had reshaped them. And I was like, reshaped them? What does that look like? Well, this is what it looks like. These are our wedding bands. This heart. The heart in the inner heart is my wedding band, and the outer heart is Mark's wedding band. So it's in the shape of a heart. I can wear this forever. Sometimes I may choose to tell someone the meaning of this necklace. Sometimes it's just a very nice piece of jewelry, but I was able to take our wedding bands and heart for love and have them. I thought that was a wonderful way to be able to repurpose something that was very personable, that I cherished, and to be able to have it for a long time. Another thing was dealing with clothing. That was difficult in my mind to think about. I remember going into Mark's closet in our bedroom, and I opened the closet door and I touched the clothing, and I felt like I closed my eyes and I rolled across the top of the hangers. And in my mind, I could just think, when I opened my eyes and looked at each hanger, when he wore it, where we were, what that experience was like, and something we were doing. And I said to myself, girl, you going to be stuck here. In my mind, it was like one of those movies you watch where the sun goes up and the moon goes down and then days go by. I saw myself with the potential of being stuck, standing there, going over these clothes and touching them and looking at them, and thinking about him in every moment, in every situation. And I had to find a way to pull myself out of that. And this was the first week he had passed. And I said, I can't do this, Tina. I can't do this. I've got to find a way to get this not where I'm going to be. And family and friends were over. I don't know if it was, I think it was maybe the day before his funeral, or no, it was sometime thereafter. I don't know. Family and friends were there. And I went into the bedroom to get something, and I looked at his closet again. Once again, I'm rolling my hands over the clothing. And I was like, okay, this is it. Everybody's in the house. There were some friends there. His brother was there. And I was like, this is it. I called his brother and his wife back and said, this is your brother's closet. I want you to take out of here whatever you feel like that you can use. Now, before I did that, I did take out some items I was not ready to part with. There were some suits and some other items that I knew I wasn't there yet, but I put them in another closet. I brought in some trash bags and I let them take whatever they felt like they used. I left the room. I could not watch that. I could barely pull myself away from the Rolodex of touching the clothing, let alone to watch somebody do that. So they took what they identified, took it to the car, and came back into the house with everyone else. I got some friends. His name is Mark, interestingly enough, and her name is Chris. And Chris, you will see on one of the podcasts. Chris and Mark came into the bedroom, and I gave them some more trash bags, and they took items. Now, Mark and Mark were very much built similar, so it was quite ironic. And they were able to take items, and that reduced the amount of clothing that was left in the house. The other thing that was kind of unique to our situation, my late husband Mark and I wore the same size shoe. So to this day, I have hiking boots. I have tons of socks because he was a hunter. So I have those really good wool socks that I keep. And the rest of the dress shoes and things like that. When my first cousin Kathy came to visit me, I took it to say, okay, this is the last of it. We found some place, I think, where men were trying to get back into the workplace. And they came and we packed up the remainder of his clothing and took them there. So that was a huge way to be able to clean up. Now there's household items. There were some guys from work that came and were kind enough to sort through all of Mark's tools. They identified and made a tool bag for me of what I would need of regular stuff around the house. There was a larger red tool box, and they took all of the tools, sorted them out, identified what I would need as far as a big toolbox to have, because my husband was an electrician. So Mark had a lot of tools, not stuff I was using, but stuff that I would need being in the house. And so there were a lot of duplicates. Some tools were older, and they put those together, and they also made toolboxes for the children to have. And Alexander at some point, I think, did obtain the tools that I had kept. I don't think Catherine's gotten hers yet. No, I don't think so. So that was helpful. The next step was everything in the house, because I was moving from Pennsylvania to Virginia. We had a home with 4 people: our son Alexander, our daughter Catherine, and Mark, and myself. In November of 2016, there were 4 people in the house. In May of 2017, it was 1, and it was me. And I was mad. I felt like everybody left, everyone abandoned me. And I was in the house trying to figure out what to do. And the reality was, it was time for me to make the house my home. I needed to make the house in a way that was comfortable for me. It wasn't expensive. I literally just start rearranging furniture and moving things around and making it suited for me as an individual. So for you, you may be left in an apartment. You may be left in a home. Heck, you could be having a boathouse or a trailer, but the way your place is set up, is probably set up for you and that person that is now passed. And it's hard removing their items. It can be hard trying to move things around. You may be in a situation where you and your spouse were separated. You may have been on the verge of getting a divorce, but their contents still remain in your home. It still can be hard. It still may be difficult. So I wouldn't discount that. I have talked to friends who have had spouses that were deceased and the marriage was in a difficult place. It was still difficult because now you're grieving that relationship that wasn't fulfilled, and you're also grieving this person that left unexpectedly. But the cleaning up of that is a challenge. I know people that have waited years, and if that's what it is for you, you can wait years. If it's something you need to do immediately, you can do that too. But it will be done in your time. And it's okay, because that's what grief looks like. I think I've covered a good amount of the things that I want to talk about from my conversation with my brother Jesse. I hope this was helpful for you. Have a good day.